gentlemen, welcome back to this week's episode of The Couch Trip, Therapy for Everyday Life. That's the therapist, Eddie Reece. My name's Billy Courtright, and I try my best to be the voice of the every person. Eddie and I were just having a conversation and just talking about life and his love for therapy and my love for his knowledge, wisdom, and insights on everything therapy related. I was a little bit amazed by the conversation we had and how, in my opinion, Eddie's heartfelt way trying to help me make sense of some things that were going on in my life. And it was like we were grabbing, elements of many, many different conversations that he and I have had here on this Couch Trip podcast. And it became incredibly clear to me that the concepts and the consistency of the application of those concepts and the credibility in which Eddie delivers those concepts in the very friendly, approachable way that he hopefully does for you, because he certainly does for me on this podcast. It was kind of an aha moment for me. And I even remarked about it. And of course, Eddie's response with a chuckle was pretty matter of fact. And again, just rich with wisdom. And we thought, well, geez, this is just not that it would be a greatest hits, but it would certainly be a lot of what we've discovered together, and what I've discovered, very similar to hopefully what you're discovering in viewing or listening to these podcasts, wherever you listen or view podcasts, or if you're reading the blog or the transcript, or if you're finding us on Substack or Medium or wherever you find us. Hopefully at some point the light bulb's going off for you. And I was reminded of the proverb, when the teacher's ready, the student appears. And so as I've been listening to Eddie for months and pretty fascinated with each and every conversation that we have, I can promise you that it's starting to make sense. Okay. And there are some principles that are ever present. So Eddie and I are just gonna have a conversation about the real life circumstances that many of us find ourselves in, and how it ties to a lot of the concepts that we've heard over and over again on these podcasts, and why that's the case, why that consistency or repetitive nature, depending on how you want to look at it, presents itself. So here we go. So I sat down and I was talking about a conversation that I had with a close family member, and the concept of resentments and amends and selfishness and self-centeredness came in. And we actually, I kind of gave an anecdotal recreation of something that had happened in my mind and in my heart. And Eddie, in his very matter-of-fact way, kind of told me what was going on. And although I never would have in a million years used the words that he used to describe what I was feeling, it was absolutely 100% dead on nuts what I was going through. And so Eddie, I guess the question that I have for you, and maybe we delve a little deeper into some personal things that I'm having, on my heart. But but the question, I guess, is why is it that the prescription or the answer or the antidote or the explanation for a lot of these day-to-day, we say therapy for everyday life in our opener every week. Why is it that my impression is, although I may be coming from a different place and challenged by a different thing, at the end of the day, it's like all roads lead to these fundamental truths about therapy and our self-image and our self-opinion and what we say to ourselves and how that conversation makes us feel good or bad, pissed off or joyful. Why is everything so simple and consistent and maybe even a little repetitive?
Why is everything so simple? That puts pictures in my head, and I have better pictures and words at the moment. Things aren't that simple. People are not that simple. It's a pretty complicated mess, kind of like a ball of string that's all wadded up and wrapped in on itself. The method to unravel that ball, the method to get to where you would like to go is fairly simple in terms of here are the things you need to do, here's the way you want to think about it, or the practices you want to put into your life. There's not any piece of that that's difficult. when I talk to a client, say about nervous system regulation, I'll say, you exhale. And then near the end of the conversation, they'll go, wow, this sounds really hard. And I go, what's hard about this? There's nothing hard about it. But what's in their mind at that point is some end game where I will be this wonderfully calm, relaxed human being with no anxiety. Well, that would be hard because that's impossible. But the process of exhale, drop your shoulders, none of that's hard. And I change hard to tricky with myself and folks. It's not hard. It's just tricky. It's tricky to remember to do it. It's tricky to remind yourself to work it into your day-to-day schedule. But none of it's hard. What's hard is not changing.
Right.
Resisting change, trying things to make a difference in your life that will never ever work. All that's hard.
Yeah, there's a saying, and I'm most of our listeners have probably heard it or some version of it, where it's not about what happens to us, but how we react to what happens to us, or some non-bastardized version of that saying. And it brings to mind that there is a decision or a series of decisions or some consciousness applied to our situation. And I think what might be helpful for me or anyone listening or viewing is what's the right way to deal with those things that happen that immediately trigger an unpleasant response. You're agitated, you're aggravated, you're unhappy.
Yeah. Rule number one with anything like that, anything that would cause you to say, well, what should I do? The answer will pretty much always be regulate and listen. So what I hear you saying is, if you do what you've always done, instead of listening, you're going to speak. And you're going to speak from a place that's unregulated, jacked up, mad, angry, rageful, hurt, sad. And probably is not going to come out well.
I equated it to a tantrum.
Yeah, and the tantrum's a word I stumbled upon decades ago and started using because that really is what most of us are doing in our lives. We're throwing these tantrums. We're in a tantrum. The way I think of it is, I'm demanding something that's impossible. And I will continue to hold my breath and cross my arms and stomp up and down and yell and scream until I get the impossible, which obviously is never going to work. But just as a child fails to see what they're doing, they don't see that it's not going to work. Neither do we, which is what brings people to therapy. They're trying to do something that's never, ever going to work. And they're initially going to come to me and saying, make this work.
Yeah.
And my job gets really tricky at that point because I have to help them see that what they're asking for is impossible. When they are absolutely sure it's going to happen at some point, if they can just figure out the right way to say it, do it, it'll happen. And that, that'll go back to the conversation on grief, that you've got to let this go. You've got to grieve it. You've got to stop putting so much time and effort and energy into something you're not going to get.
Right.
That's hard. That's hard for us to do.
I would imagine. And I'm, as I sit here, at times I would imagine, I could be wrong, but I would imagine that people come to you tasking you with creating comfort from discomfort.
Yeah. Everybody's looking for comfort. Everybody's looking for a resolution, which is always going to be some version of, I feel okay now. Everything's okay. it would be the way a child responds if they throw a tantrum for something that isn't impossible. Get me that toy. And then a parent finally relents and gives them the toy. That, the child at that point is ecstatic. So yeah, it would feel like that. That's what they're coming in to get. They want that. But that's probably not the best bet, because then now the child has trained the parent to give me what I want, and the parent is being trained that I'm going to have to listen to this, and then I'll eventually give in, and so the pattern will repeat itself.
Yeah.
The worn out example I use is you want your kid to clean their room, and you go in and you go in 10 times, clean your room or else. And the 11th time you go in, they're not there. You look at it, you're so disgusted, you clean it up. So the kid is being trained that, 10 times, I can listen to that 10 times, and then my room gets cleaned and they're quiet. They don't care that their room is clean. They don't come home and go, yay, my room is clean, because that's not what they wanted to begin with. But they know now you're going to shut up. So great. I listen to this 10 times and then it goes away for a while.
Right.
That's just the way it works. That's how we're trained for everything.
So we talked about a little bit about how the level of discomfort, and you referenced it a minute ago, that one can feel as a result of something that they didn't invite or aren't happy with. And I had used the term angry, and you quickly reframed it. And you were right, but you're like, no, that's not anger, that's rage.
Yeah. And
it immediately, if you recall, I was like, yep, that's rage, because that's helpless, hopeless, and powerless. Like that absolutely is how I'm feeling. And then you combine that with tantrum, and I began to immediately feel silly. Like, what am I doing? Like, this is to your point. There's no outcome. There's no difference this is going to make. This isn't satiating in any way.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm reminded that therapy and good therapy is really a process, in my opinion, of getting through, not making something comfortable, bearable, or easy, but just making sense of it in a way that allows someone to process it absent that tantrum state, that rage state.
Yeah. And when I do something like that, when I'll name what I see someone doing. My hope is to give them, I'm blanking on the guy's name, therapist that was a pioneer back in the 50s and 60s, Alfred Adler. He said, when you say the truth to a client, they'll generally laugh. And he called that the shock of recognition. That's me. And it happens when there are parts of ourselves we don't want to see. And we do our best to rationalize those away. I'm just standing up for myself. No, you're being a really big jerk. I get couples come in. Generally, the guy will come in and, my wife is telling me, that I'm being mean to her, or I'm mistreating her, or she doesn't like the things that I say. And I'm saying, what kind of things you saying? And even giving me a cleaned up version, which I'm sure it is, I go, that's mean. What's mean about that? I'm just trying to get her to understand that she's wrong about this, and I go, well, that's mean. I'm trying to get you to understand you're wrong about this. What if I said that to you about this? Well, you just need to understand you're wrong about this. You're being mean. That's being mean. And maybe she's wrong, maybe she's not. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's your behavior that has to change. Why do I have to change? When's she going to change? I don't know if she'll ever change or not. As a matter of fact, if all I cared about was your self-development, I'd pay her to do what she does that pisses you off so that you can learn to deal with it in a way that will actually work. So you have to make changes. Well, yeah, because you're the one who's here.
Yeah.
I can't change her from here. If I could do that, I'd really be rich.
Well, so much of what I believe makes therapy and therapists and psychotherapy as a discipline so fascinating is this, what you just said, which is and it kind of feeds off of what I said a minute ago, which is it's not what happens, it's how we deal. It's how we personally deal with what's happened, and it puts a level of accountability, I guess, or there. I guess there's some power in knowing that, you know, through good therapy we can learn to process and get to a place of comfort or lack of discomfort, I guess. It sounds empowering
with uncomfortable.
Correct. 100%.
You've got to go, I'm uncomfortable, and be comfortable with that.
Right. I heard procrastination defined as the unwillingness to deal with uncomfortable emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, gosh, I'd never heard it looked at that way. But the more I thought about it, or never heard it articulated that way, and then the more I thought about it, it's like, yeah, that's exactly why I'm waiting the last minute to do my taxes or to clean the garage or blow the leaves or whatever. It's like something about that I don't want to do. It's uncomfortable. It's work. It's effort. It's taking me away from pleasure, comfort, or laziness or whatever. And that's why we procrastinate, because what we're doing now feels better.
Right. Yeah. And that in itself is a tantrum.
Yeah,
you know,
it's kind of sounded like it.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that because this is better, that's bad. You know, we have some kind of what we consider a thing to do, and we just don't want to do it. And instead of exploring why we don't, we just go, it's bad, and therefore I'm not going to do bad things. And then we make up, and going back to our fantasy podcast, we make up a story about how bad that's going to be. And that's why I'm not going to do it. Oh my God, I got to do my taxes. Oh my God, that means I've got to pull out all those receipts. I've got to sit down for hours and hours and hours, you know, and you know, once you finally do it, it took a couple hours maybe. But we tell ourselves these stories, and then we rebel against being made to do something, because there's one part of us that's saying do it, another part hears that and goes no. And so the problem with not getting the task done is because there's this battle going on. And you're going to do this. No, I'm not. You know, yeah. And when we get to that point, which only takes a few seconds for most of us, then we're dug in, and now we're living our day-to-day lives. We're just spending our time dug in. You know, clients come in, and I hear a lot of complaints about work from my clients, and a lot of my clients work in IT. And they've got reason to complain. I mean, you know, they're putting in 60, 70 hours a week. I mean, it's just really awful how that business runs. And so what I do is I say, well, okay, the job sounds horrible. I don't know how you do it. As I think about it, that's awful. But it's really not the job that's the problem. It's how you're responding to the job and the things that are being asked and or demanded of you. If you could learn to respond to those differently, you would feel differently, because you would be a different person. And you could actually respond differently, wind up working fewer hours, actually not being so stressed out by what they're telling you to do, because if you just go to work and you're just another cog in the wheel, why would you worry about any of it? It's not your money, you know. It's not your company, it's not your product, it's not your name on the building. I mean, they tell you to do something that is silly, not going to work or cause a big mess. And you go, well, sir, I don't think that might. And they go, well, just do it. "Oh, okay." There's a saying in some of the business consulting I've studied that it's like, best way to get your boss fired is do everything they tell you to do.
Oh, wow.
So you just do it. Who cares? And then things fall apart, and you just go,
But for
those
some
of
of
you
us,
who know Alfred E. Newman,
yeah,
what, me worry? I mean, it's not my thing. But most of us are very attached to all of those things.
that's right.
And that's what causes you to suffer, not that you have this job.
No, what's the suffering comes from in my opinion, our impression of how we're doing that job and whether or not we're enjoying what we're doing or if we're doing a good job.
Which can be summed up by saying our attachment, how we attach. I really love what the Buddhists say, that attachment causes suffering. And it takes a while to really understand what attachment is. But in this case, the attachment is, I have to do a really good job. I have to be noticed and get promoted and make more money and get a bigger title and a bigger office. And I got to do this. You're attached to that.
100%. It's an expectation.
And so that attachment is where the suffering comes from.
Correct.
And you say, well, aren't we supposed to be motivated to get better? Well, sure. You can say all the exact same things, but not be attached to it, in that if it doesn't happen, or if I don't think it's happening fast enough or the way I want it to happen, then I will rage. And that's where attachment leads to.
That's 100% right. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly how this conversation started an hour ago.
It did.
Because I had said, I wasn't, I had been wronged. I wasn't getting the acknowledgement or validation from this person who had wronged me. Moreover, no one was even recognizing the me. Like no one would even acknowledge or validate the fact that I should feel the way I feel. And so not only was I never going to, I wasn't going to receive amends. I wasn't going to receive an apology. I wasn't going to be made right. In the witness of people I care about, they were never going to see my side. And I just wanted to not care.
And you said what everybody said, which is wrong. I wanted to not care. That's not true. You want to learn to actually care, because you're not caring, taking the stance that you take. When you throw a tantrum, you're not a caring person.
No, you're emotional, but you're not.
Yeah, you're throwing a tantrum. You're raging. You're feeling hopeless, helpless, and powerless, and you're demanding power and power over. So when people say, "Well, it works better if I just don't care," no, it doesn't. It won't work at all. You have to learn to care, and caring is, I want this outcome. I want for. In the case you're talking about, I want our relationship to be better, or, what I would hope it would be, or I want to lose my rage and anxiety and demands over all of this, and eventually learn to get to being able to begin the forgiveness process and then the grieving process, to mention other podcasts, since this is kind of our greatest hits sort of thing. Even though it's not an album of our greatest hits, it's an album of us throwing tidbits of our greatest bits. That's what we're doing. So that caring is really caring. I care, but I'm not attached in a way that's going to make me rage. And attachment, as the Buddhists talk of it best to my understanding, is attachment will lead to rage. It leads to suffering. It leads to this hopeless, helpless feeling that things never go the way I want them to, and
And at the root of that is the fact that we're feeling like as if somehow something we do can make them go that way. In many cases.
Oh yeah, that's our fantasy issues. There are fantasy podcasts that a when you have a tantrum, we seem to be coming back to that. You make up a fantasy, which is what the tantrum is sort of based on. I will hold my breath, and then I will get what I want.
Yeah.
I'll scream loud enough, and I'll get what I want, and maybe that will work from time to time. But you're not really getting what you want, which is a sense of power, agency, the ability to cooperate, the ability to feel like you have some influence.
Right.
You're not going to get any of that. So you're not really getting what you want, which is another thing. Most of us think this is what I want, but that's not really what you want. I just want her to understand what I'm saying. Well, no, you really don't. What you really want is for her to agree with you, and not only on this issue, but every issue.
Right.
And if you
not even just agree, acquiesce, surrender.
Exactly. If you got what you wanted, you would leave her because she has no spine. And you would accuse her of that when you walked out the door. So that's not what you really want. But you don't know what you really want, which is a cooperative, loving, communicative, closely, emotionally intimate relationship with somebody. But you don't have a clue that even exists. So why would you want it? But that's what all human beings want. Down inside somewhere.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And and before we got into what we do want or what the emotional connection that we're craving or whatever, what that looks like, you had talked about, I keep mentioning tantrum. And in my mind, I was like, well, the pattern here is you have, unwelcome circumstance, situation, or feeling, followed by emotional outbursts, followed by, some level of nervous system regulation, and maybe in advanced stages of therapy, or we would get into a kindness dialogue or a forgiveness of self. Do I have that?
Yeah.
Is that somewhere in the ballpark?
Yeah. I mean, it really comes back to where you started. Something happens that in our mind should not happen.
Right. I called an unwelcome circumstance or emotion.
Yeah. Okay. Something which, and you say, well, the problem is that this went wrong. No, the problem is that you believed something could happen that you didn't have on the agenda.
Right.
That's the problem. Because good Lord, you've got mountains of evidence that tells you it never goes the way you want. I mean, that's why somebody came up with Murphy's Law at some point, because things are going to go differently than we expect them to. And so that goes back to what we've mentioned probably a number of times, that I think it's best to live your life as improv. This comes at me and I say yes and to it, which doesn't mean that you accept it and it doesn't bother you or whatever. It just means you don't fight against it. You don't go into your demand that it not happen or that it go away or that, I mean, there's just a lot of different ways, we do that when something unexpected happens. And I go, is it really unexpected? It shouldn't be unexpected that things are going to happen that you don't want. So this unexpected thing, you might not have been able to think, well, that might happen. But you've got to train yourself that things are going to happen that I don't want to happen. I'd rather not have a body that ages. I just would rather not. I mean, that would be my preference. But it's aging, and I'm just like, I mean, there's something about the, I've got a button to open my computer, and I can put my finger on it, and it reads my fingerprint, and the thing opens. Well, that doesn't work anymore. And the best I can tell, the reason it doesn't work is because my skin is getting so dry and sort of brittle and just sort of shrinking up like old people's skin does, that my fingerprint doesn't look the same anymore. I mean, I haven't read that anywhere. So if a listener has come across that, somebody that understands these things.
Somebody in the comments is going to be like, take some Windex and a paper towel and clean that thing.
No, it's clean. Trust me, it's clean. Alcohol pads. I mean, I've got them in almost every room.
Yeah.
It's clean.
Those aren't tucks.
It won't work. It just won't work. And, so every time I open my computer, I'm punching a passcode instead of use my finger, because it's like, that's not going to work. And there's always some, at least tiny bit of irritation that happens.
Sure.
When I do that, because it's not the way I want it to be.
Like when the Wi-Fi doesn't work on the airplane.
Oh,
how dare that fail?
I gave up on that. I was like, follow these easy steps to connect to Wi-Fi. No, it's not going to work.
We're in a metal tube at 30,000 feet,
and you people aren't going to put any
hour.
money into making this work. I can tell you that right now. So I don't even try the Wi-Fi.
That is funny.
I'm not buying that.
Your last series of comments reminded me of a book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jocko Willink. He's a Navy SEAL.
Sounds familiar.
I recently came across one of his YouTube shorts, but he's a Navy SEAL. Wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. He's a leadership thought leader now, for whatever. But there's a fairly famous short reel story going around the internet about good. And it speaks to what you said about this predictability, lack of predictability, agenda, what you expect may never happen, Murphy's Law. And essentially it's that, somebody he's working with is disconcerted over the current state of their organization. And every time they come to Jocko, who's a leadership consultant and a fairly well-known executive coach or whatnot, and no matter what they say, he always responds with good. No, it's like, we're not meeting our numbers, and I didn't get the promotion, I didn't get the raise, I didn't good. And it's like, and then the person is like, I don't even want to tell you anything anymore because I know you're just going to respond with good. And then he goes into the explanation of good, like no matter what happens, it is good because there's always a way to reframe it as, okay, now we have more time to perfect the prototype, or great, now we have more time to prepare for when we do get that promotion, or good, we can use this as a learning experience. So it's a reframe, and the whole, if you just Google Jocko Good, you'll see the YouTube short.
That makes sense to me. I wouldn't frame it that way because I do my best to try not to talk in terms of good and bad, even though I do it all the time anyway, because that's the way our language is built, because I'm now saying, well, that's not a very good way to do that. But I get his point. This gives us an opportunity. I've just started reading a book called The Obstacle is the Way.
And Ryan Holiday.
Ryan Holiday, yeah. And which is
I'm reading Ego is the Enemy right now, which is
the obstacle is the way is ancient. I mean, that's Greek philosophy.
Sure. Stoicism, right?
Yeah. And that's really what I think Jocko was talking about. That, okay, well, we have an obstacle we can use. And we could do a podcast on that. How do you use the obstacle? And that's really what I think he's saying. And this is something I try to help my clients understand, that part of the problem is the way you're naming the problem. You're naming it as something that's either irretractable or is going to take a tremendous effort, close to impossible to change it. And that's why you're so downtrodden about it. But you want to learn that this is not something that is stopping me. It's not the job that's making you miserable. It's how you experience the job, the stories you tell yourself, the things you put up with, the things you won't do, the things you do that are making you miserable. So let's change those. Now, your job might be a job you should get out of, but you're better off if you can learn the lessons that the job is trying to teach you. I say that in relationships that are struggling. Get a divorce if you want to, if they're married. Break up if you want to. But why not take this opportunity to learn some lessons that this very person is doing an exceptional job of showing you that you need to learn? Because you're going to have to learn them at some point if you want a decent relationship. Yeah. So might as well learn them now. Use the obstacle.
That's right. Without the resistance, there is no strength gained.
Without the resistance, there is no strength gained. Is that what you say?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to lift weights without weights.
It's
hard to build muscle.
I don't know. I know people that are lifting mental gymnastics.
Well, if you could patent or figure out a way to, and believe you me, this is out on the internet everywhere. If you can figure out a way to sell strength training as an info product, I'll buy it.
Strength training, mental strength, emotional strength.
Sure, and that's
what you're doing. Yeah,
well, we certainly are.
Yeah.
But anyway, listen. We're gonna kind of try to wrap this up, and this will be the last 5 or 10 minutes, and it'll kind of interesting. I've been trying to keep a mental tab of all the concepts and that we've talked about, and I think we should probably bring it home with where we inevitably always end up, or at least if you're talking to Eddie, or if you're blessed to have Eddie as your therapist, you've inevitably heard this series of thoughts or perspectives before, and we've talked about. And just on this episode, we've talked about grief, we've talked about rage, we've talked about shame, we've talked about what else? What am I missing? We've talked about oh gosh.
Well, we haven't talked about our biggest hit,
which is where I'm going.
Yeah, which is I'm sure you're going because it's time for the encore.
It is the show. It's if all roads lead to what I'm going to call KD, then. Whether we're talking about grief, whether we're talking about shame, whether we're talking about rage, helpless, hopeless, and powerlessness, whether we're talking about communication, relationships, whether we're talking about self-image, self-loathing, whether we're talking about comfort in discomfort, in malleability or flexibility in the circumstances we're dealing with, which again is probably another way of saying just being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Ultimately, the conversation that we're going to have either with ourselves or anyone else is what, in my opinion, Eddie is most known for. And if we could sum up the philosophy or the practice that is Eddie Reece, I think this would be, the crux, the thesis, the topic sentence, the master class for his manner of therapy. So Eddie, again, how do we always end up on the kindness dialogue?
Well, the big hit is curiosity, kindness, compassion. And the way you train yourself to be more curious, kinder, more compassionate is through that dialogue, which involves listening. As I mentioned earlier today, listen instead of speak. And in order to listen, you're going to have to regulate. There's the end result of any discussion that I have about any kind of issue is going to wind up involving you've got to regulate your nervous system because you're struggling because your nervous system is unregulated. And I don't know if I've ever put it this way before, but unregulated means if you were measuring your nervous system, it means it is somewhere, and it could be anywhere, that won't allow you to meet the needs of what's in front of you. And to explain that, if your nervous system is measured, low to high, and low being relaxed, high being, completely enraged. If it's too low and you've got a physical sort of mental task to do, you've got to raise it up. You've got to regulate to get up there. If it's too high, you regulate to get down there. So you're always having to move that around. So nervous system regulation, which is learning, where am I? Just by listening to your body, and then where do I want to be, and then how do I get there?
Yep.
That skill set is fundamental. I mean, you're just not going to function really well if you can't do that. And a lot of us do that most of the time without even thinking about it. But if you add a little bit of a threat level into what you're doing, chances are you're going to get unregulated. So it's the nervous system regulation, so that you can actually have a kindness dialogue, whether it's with yourself or someone else, and be the listener and listen with this, I really want to understand. I really want to hear this. I really want to see where they're coming from, and mean it, not so that you can have information about them so you can beat the crap out of them in some sort of better way, but so that you really do see this other person as they are. And if you can do that, it's pretty easy to just naturally feel some compassion for them. And if you don't, which happens when I'm working with a client, I can walk them through an internal kindness dialogue, and they will follow the steps. And when they get to the end of, well, they'll go, yeah, I mean, I get it. And they can kind of rattle off, you think this because of that, but you can hear the tone, yeah, I get it. You think this is because of that, you idiot. They're raging at them. So they do have an intellectual kind of, I can follow the steps you're taking to get there, but you're still stupid. So they weren't being curious in a way to really see the other person. They just wanted another way to beat them up, or the other part of themselves. So practicing regulation all the time by doing the kindness dialogue all the time. And I say it that way because it takes so much time for any of us, I know it did for me, to realize all the time means all the time. While I'm doing the podcast, stay regulated, because keep regulating, checking in, be kind, be curious, and really listen to what is being said, take it in. It's all the time, which you'll never do. And then don't beat yourself up because you can't do something that is impossible. I mean, there's just no way in the world anybody is going to be this ideal person 24/7. It's not going to happen. I'm sure the Dalai Lama has his outbursts.
Yeah, no, I think it's part of the human condition, and it, we'll kind of bring it home with, we'll think back to some of our early episodes. And by the way, if this is the first time you're coming across the Couch Trip podcast, Therapy for Everyday Life with Eddie Reece and myself, you've likely heard a bunch of the things that have been discussed on this podcast over the last 40 or some odd episodes. And if I think back all the way to some of our earliest conversations, I remember talking about the inner brain and the conditions of, fight or flight or flock or freeze, or how the brain of certain animals differs from our brain, and the ability to interject in that moment a dialogue of any kind is what, in my opinion, makes us human. And again, if this episode or this 30 or 45 minutes got you curious and you kindly want to go back and check out some episodes and compassionately leave us a review, we would certainly appreciate it. But the reality is this would be a great place to start, and just know that there's at least 40 other episodes wherever you consume podcasts, whether that's visual on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube Podcasts. Now it used to be Google Podcasts, or whether you're reading us on either Substack or Medium, or our blog, the blog of the Couch Trip website, or maybe you found us on Getting Along. So either way, hopefully this got your curiosity up.
Yeah, and as I listen to you, I want to mention that at the time of this podcast, not all of that is out there. We've taken quite a circuitous route. Is that the word? Route to doing all of this. We've recorded way more podcasts than we have published, and the infrastructure is being built along the way, and the publication doesn't follow the way we recorded them. So we might record episode 37 and release it before episode 2. So forgive us if you look for something that we mentioned and it's not there. That doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means we haven't really published it yet. So stick that in the comments.
Well, I guess that's Eddie's way of saying this one should be published tomorrow, as opposed to perhaps in 3 months. Who knows? I don't even know for sure what is published and what's not. I'm sort of flying low with all this and staying in the minutia of it. I don't pull myself back long enough to take a look at the whole thing to remember what was done or not done. I don't know. But what's been done has been wonderful. And
it's been fun.
This conversation that we have every week. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another outstanding conversation between myself and Eddie Reece. Eddie is the founder and the originator and the thought leader behind the Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life podcast. My name is Billy Courtright, and we will continue to come back and give you some information, inspiration, and hopefully some influence to get you to reach out to a local therapist if any of this seems like it might be applicable to whatever it is that you're experiencing in your life. And if you're not quite ready to take that step, feel free to drop us a comment or send us a message. We've got forms all over the place, and we'd be happy to give you the best advice we can.
Yeah, and you know, it's as to finish up, I want to say Billy and I really get a kick out of doing these, and I guess the way you could frame our hope for the podcast is that you enjoy it, and at least every now and then, at least enjoy it as much as we do, and let us know that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, ta-ta for now. We'll be back next week for another one. Ciao.
Bye-bye.